Welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast, dedicated to parents and anyone else who loves someone in active addiction. Education is a powerful tool in breaking down stigma, fostering understanding, and ultimately helping individuals and their loved ones navigate the challenges of addiction. With Donna Marston, author of Peeling the Onion and Sharing Without Shame. So take a deep breath and grab some tissues as we uncover the stories of love, courage, and unwavering support in the face of adversity, as Donna and her guests share their stories without shame. Because when we share our stories without shame, we inspire others to do the same.
So hello and welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast. I'm your host, Donna Marston, and today's podcast is brought to you by Snap Bands, and this is my band. It says Blessings, and it's for cognitive therapy. You just give it a little snap, and you snap yourself right out of a bad thought, a craving, or whatever. This mine happened to say Blessings, and I didn't understand or never thought of it this way, but when I received it, it said that I'm a blessing, and I thought, what? How? That was just such a great thing. So go to Snapbands, that's SNAPPBANDZ.com, and write in SWOS or Sharing Without Shame so they'll know that you heard about the bands from me, Sharing Without Shame podcast. So today I'm so excited to welcome Scarlett Lewis, who is the founder of the Choose Love Movement, a global nonprofit dedicated to cultivating love, connection, and resilience in schools, homes, and communities. Inspired by the heroic actions of her 6-year-old son, Jesse, during the Shady Hook Elementary tragedy, Scarlett turned her profound loss into a mission to teach others how to choose love. Her work has touched millions of lives across more than 120 countries, empowering individuals to face adversity with courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion. Scarlett is also an accomplished author and a passionate advocate for social emotional healing. Welcome, Scarlett.
Thank you so much, Donna. Great to be here.
Nice to meet you. First question I always ask is, what would you like to share without shame?
Share without shame. So important, because when we share something, when we expose what otherwise we feel as shame, it loses all of its power over us, right? I love that concept. So I will just share my story. December 14th, 2012, my 6-year-old son, Jesse McCord Lewis, was murdered in his first grade classroom alongside 19 of his classmates and 6 educators in what is still the world's worst elementary school shooting. Actually, I guess maybe America's worst elementary school shooting. And, after that day, I spent a couple of days at my mom's house. And then when I came back to my house that I shared with my 2 boys, as a single mom, I found a message that Jesse had written on our kitchen chalkboard. He wrote 3 words: nurturing, healing, love. And I realized that that was the solution. That, I was thinking about the young man, the former student who came back to the school and perpetrated the crime. And I thought that if he could have given and received love, when we do that, we feel good about ourselves. It increases our self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves, our self-worth, the fact that we feel worthy. People that feel good do not want to cause harm to themselves or others. And I realized that was the solution. And I dedicated my life to spreading Jesse's message in schools, homes, and communities around the world, teaching kids and big kids, by the way, because I didn't have any of the skills and tools that we now teach, that we know through almost 100 years of positive psychology and decades of neuroscience, are the pathway to flourishing, to being the best version of ourselves, to learning, growing, and even being strengthened through difficulty and not being taken down by it. So that's what I've been doing for the last 12 years. And we've grown now to over 16,500 schools, I think, at this point, in
Wow.
every state and 120 countries. The message resonates because everything we do every single day is simply for love. And at the very foundation, we're either choosing from love or fear every day. Anger, hatred, resentment, a mask for fear really comes from fear. And so we're teaching kids and adults how to choose love as a thoughtful response, and therefore be your highest and best self, the true version of yourself.
Mm. Wow. Amazing. And he sounds like what a special little guy. And at 6 years old, to have to write those words.
Yeah, to write the words, nurturing, healing, love, they were phonetically spelled because he was just 6 years old and learning to write. But I believe that the message came through him
Mm,
from a higher power. And
absolutely.
I mean, because those words weren't, they're just not something that a 6-year-old would normally say. And really they're prophetic and profound. And the basis, by the way, of this formula that is a part of everything that we do, starting with courage. Doesn't it take so much courage to live life and to show up every day as the best version of yourself?
Yeah.
And Jesse, we found out also that Jesse heroically saved 9 of his classmates' lives before losing his own. And this is at 6 years old. He literally stood up to the shooter. And
Wow.
and so I talk about that courage, age appropriately, of course,
Yeah.
because that is the same capacity for courage that we all have. And I'm not talking about standing up to a shooter or anything like that. Hopefully none of us will ever experience that. I'm talking about the courage that it takes to live life, to face difficulty, roadblocks, setbacks, challenges, pain, and
Yeah.
tremendous pain that we all experience in life, physically, mentally, and emotionally. As humans, we're going to feel pain. We know
Mm,
our kids are going to feel pain. It's
mhm.
not a subject we like to talk about, but
Right.
that's what Choose Love does. It
Mm,
literally gives these essential life skills and awarenesses that pain has a purpose. It's there to help us grow. And this formula helps us to be able to face that pain and get curious and literally ask the questions how we can learn, how we can grow, and how we're going to be strengthened. This helps us be the best version of ourselves, maintain our personal power, not give it away to victimization, to literally grow through whatever happens instead of being taken down and maybe even taking down others in the process. This whole thing is called post-traumatic growth. And most people have never heard of that, to my astonishment. Of course, I had never heard of that. We've all heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I think they've chopped off the disorder and they just call it post-traumatic stress now. But what's more prevalent is the ability that we have as humans to grow through difficulty. We just need to be given the awareness and some essential life skills to be able to do it. That's what we teach.
I think it's hard, for anybody, but, as moms, I dealt with a son with addiction, and when people ask me, about my story, it's basically I've taken what once was my mess and make it my message, and you're doing the same thing, right? Not that it was a mess, but I became messy. I became an emotional mess. I was in the fetal position. I was in bed for 6 months when nobody was looking, and I couldn't put one foot in front of the other. How did you find your strength?
There was something that happened, and that's a question that I get a lot, really early on. So I'm thinking I might die because the pain was so great. I remember actually like being amazed that my body was functioning. I didn't know if it was going to last, honestly. There was so much pain. And so they my family and really first responders brought a woman who had lost a child to violence 20 years prior, and I'd never met anybody. And so really a great service they did for me was at first show me I was going to live. I literally looked at her and I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to survive. That was where I started. And then she started telling me about her journey. And about 5 minutes into the conversation, I held up my hand and I said, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story with me. But in my mind, I was thinking, that's not going to be my story. I don't want to have 20 years of suffering in front of me. And, I was literally thinking of my 12-year-old son at the time. I'm a single mom, so I'm his role model. He was going to learn from what I said, but even more than what I said, what I did, everything. And I was modeling for him in the moment. I realized that. And I also realized, that what do I want for me and my son? I wanted to live a life of joy. I wanted to get back to where we were, before his murder. And this was in the first few days. And I'm thinking, okay, so I guess no one is going to put a roadmap down in front of me. No one is going to be able to lead me to where I want to go. So I'm going to have to make the choices myself that are going to lead me there. I don't know. It was just a realization that I had, thankfully, early on, and then directed by Jesse's miraculous message. I come back to my house and I find that not only has my 6-year-old saved 9 of his classmates. Wow. I mean, that example of courage was like, okay, so if my 6-year-old son did that, how am I going to be part of the solution? I couldn't go back to my job. It wasn't doing good for the world. And I realized that what happened to Jesse was 100% preventable, as is, by the way, the majority of the long-term suffering that people have. And so, I took that message. I realized that if my life was going to change, it was going to change in all ways. And, if Jesse had the courage to save his classmates, I had the courage to quit my job, which is scary as a single mom.
Sure. Yeah.
Benefits and all of that, and start a movement, a worldwide movement. I also saw the polarization then. I saw, after Sandy Hook, it was either pro-gun or anti-gun. And there was so much blame being put around and finger pointing, fault finding. And I thought, wow, that's never going to solve the problem. And it hasn't. It's just grown, right? So I thought, I'm going to create something that promotes something that we all have in common. And that is the want and need to love and be loved. As human beings, we're 99.9% genetically the same. I think sometimes we forget that. It doesn't matter what we look like, what we believe. We're really the same. We have the same wants and needs. And that means that people need love, connection, and belonging. They need to feel good about themselves. That's how they feel good about themselves. And without that, they suffer. And the bottom line is, if you have some skills and tools, which, by the way, I didn't have when I started out at 44 years old, but when you learn them, you're not born with them. You have to learn them. But once you do, you can grow through anything that happens in your life. And so, that saying, like, pain is inevitable. As human beings, we're going to feel pain. Suffering is optional, but it's these skills and tools that aren't being taught at school. Well, they somewhat are now, but if you're a parent that doesn't have them, I didn't have them, you can't teach them to your kids. And you go to work, you're not going to learn them at work. And so it was through tragedy. And by the way, that is tremendous amount of pain. That is what gets us out of our comfort zone into our growth zone. And really kind of focuses us on what's important and what is a priority. And so I've learned a lot, and what I just want to do is give this benefit of what I've learned to other people, so they don't have to suffer like I suffered. And that's actually called vicarious post-traumatic growth. I can actually provide that, and you provide that too by sharing your story. And that's part of our formula, which is having the courage to step outside of whatever's going on with you to help other people. Sharing your story, that's part of compassion in action. And by the way, when we help and heal others, we help and heal ourselves as well, which is very powerful. When we are in pain, when we are feeling lonely, which is, loneliness is an epidemic now. If we have the courage to step outside of that and do something for someone else, we help and heal ourselves. That it's research, it's science, and it's a beautiful thing to teach kids. Can you imagine a generation that knows this, that is aware of post-traumatic growth, that has the courage to look at the difficulties that happen in life, that are going to happen,
Yeah.
and they can grow through them and then take what they've learned and use it to help other people. That's I'm trying to create the world that I, at least, and most people most likely want to live in.
Yeah, it's taking our pain and turning it into purpose,
Yes.
right? Yeah, sharing it and getting the message out. So now, you've evolved this movement, Choose Love, that you're into into schools, prisons, and my understanding, I think there's a school in New Hampshire that is using this program. And I heard through the grapevine, so as the story goes, that when they utilize the Choose Love curriculum instead of your math and that type of stuff, I mean, they still have that, but utilizing this more, they're finding that the residents are there's not as much fighting, there's not as much discipline going on. They're listening to others, because this is about, correct me if I'm wrong, it's teaching people, no matter what age you are, to hear the other side, to hear their perspective, so that you might, not that you're trying to change their mind, but they might look at it and go, oh, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we learn and grow. Yeah, grades go up, behaviors go down, because kids are able to manage themselves and be the best version of themselves. And yeah, for sure, listening. If you look at kind of like what's going on in our world right now, where there's so much division
Yeah.
and anger, and
Mhm.
that literally comes from fear. And it's so fascinating to me to know the science behind that. When you're in a fearful place, it's kind of like putting blinders on. You look for what is going to validate you, and you have very little, if any, tolerance for someone that has even a different point of view. You can't hear it because you're in your fear brain. You're literally in freeze, fight, or flight. You are not in your prefrontal cortex, where logic and reasoning reside, where the brake on your instinctual reactions is, such as fear. And so literally you're reacting in fear, and that is what is causing the division, that anger. And when we pause and can give our prefrontal cortex time to come online through a brave breath, we call it, or even doing a brave pose, then we can access the highest and best part of ourselves. And we have the courage. It takes courage even to do that, but we have also the courage that we need to listen, to actively listen, to understand another person's point of view, and to actually learn from that person's point of view. It's really a beautiful thing. Even someone that is not being kind to us. I mean, people, bullying behavior, that can
Mhm.
throw us into our fear center, and we can react with the same anger that we're facing and escalate the situation. So we have what's called a choice moment model, where kids and adults, by the way, it works the same for all of us, learn to pause. You know, if your life is not in danger, somebody is coming up and being unkind, our immediate instinct is to, you know, figuratively defend ourselves. But if we pause and give our prefrontal cortex time to come online through curiosity, wondering why that person is behaving the way they're behaving, what happened to them, understanding that hurt people, that if this
Absolutely.
person felt good, they would not be approaching you that way. Then that understanding enables you to thoughtfully respond with love instead of anti-bullying, you know, focusing on the problem, which a lot of times makes it worse even for the victims, because you're actually teaching, you know, more ways to bully and bringing that to light. We're actually focused on the other end. We're focused on providing skills and tools to understand and then manage the pain and create a kind and compassionate response, something
Mm.
that will help that person instead of escalating the situation.
Yeah, because people's pain comes out through their fists, through their mouths, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, we teach that you can become aware of, we call it, who's the boss, right? Just by having a conversation with somebody or how somebody's acting, you know exactly who's their boss. Is it their fear center or is it their
Mm.
prefrontal cortex? Is it their logic and reasoning? I mean, it's pretty simple. And by the way, if it's their fear center, then, you know, it's coming from a point of pain, and understanding that can help you thoughtfully respond compassionately. Because if you get triggered, if you get angry in return, who's in control of that situation now? They are. You've just given all
Yeah.
of your power to them.
Yeah.
And so when you retain that power, when you thoughtfully respond with love.
Mm. I was watching this. He's a teacher, and had kindergartners, I think. And one of the little kids came over and was crying because somebody hurt his feelings. And he said to him, "You need to go back and tell him he hurt your feelings because he doesn't know that." And it took the little one a minute. I mean, as adults, we don't do that.
Exactly. I mean, it's actually the same lessons, which I don't say frequently when I'm in schools, but it's the same lessons. And by the way, you know, the audience might be thinking, gosh, I know all this stuff. The thing is, you may know it, you may not. By the way,
Yeah.
I didn't. But, you know, it's putting it into action. It's being aware of it. It's remembering to use these skills and tools. And by the way, life is this beautiful thing that it gives us the opportunity to, as we call it, choose love as a thoughtful response in difficult situations all day long. And you know what, you may master it in one situation, and then something else is going to happen and you're going to go, ooh, I got to bring out that formula again. And just so
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows, this is simply it's a free curriculum. It's available for everyone, and it was really important for me to make it free because I know this would have saved my son's life. It would have
Mm.
saved the shooter's life. It could reduce and prevent so much suffering, the suffering that actually leads to attacks, to violence, to bullying, to substance abuse, to mental illness, to so many of the issues that we're seeing today. We can reduce and prevent the suffering with some awarenesses and essential life skills. So in order to access this, you just go on our website, chooselovemovement.org, you register, and you find, if you're a teacher, if you're homeschooling, if you have an after school program, if you pass a daycare, you know, even if you don't have kids, if you're a grandparent, we have a home program, we have a community program. It's literally just a universal language that's used everywhere. So sign up and join the movement, because we're all responsible for our world. That was actually one of the best decisions that I made. And in the beginning, not a lot of people understood it, especially my family. But when I said, I take my part of the responsibility to what happened what happened to my son in his school. This school is in my community. It's where my son went. I know that what happens around me, I am responsible for. This is my world. And the thing was, my family was like, gosh, don't ever say that. That's what I said in my first interview. They were like, it's not your fault. And I said, I'm not talking about fault. I'm talking about responsibility. It is my responsibility. And in that way, when I take that, I can be part of the solution and I'm not a victim. And I was very determined that my older son and myself would not be additional victims of the shooter. He could definitely have destroyed our family, and I was
Sure.
not going to allow that to happen. I was going to make sure that we grew from that. I wasn't sure how, but literally Choose Love is my journey of growing and researching what that looks like. That's available for everyone.
And they can become ambassadors. I just became an ambassador.
Yes, I'm so excited, Donna. Thank you so much. Yes, you can become an ambassador. You can help us spread the message. In fact, that's how the Choose Love message has been spread, by word of mouth, which is, by the way, still I've found the most powerful way to spread a message, and the referral of the program to other people. So as you said, you can use Choose Love in any capacity, and we're continuing to find new outlets that want to use Choose Love, and different people that have taken it and incorporated it into what they do in all aspects of life, which is really beautiful, including, prisons, and for at-risk youth, foster care, after school program, halfway houses. There's so many different ways that you can incorporate these essential life skills.
Yeah, so I work in the field of recovery, and it goes hand in hand, right? Because they need to be loved more, not less, when they're in active addiction, and it's their pain, their internal pain, or their trauma, and that's why people self-medicate. So I'm curious, bringing this into the prisons or jails, what does that look like? And do you find that mostly it's people with a substance use disorder that sign up or participate?
We have all kinds of people participate, but a lot of people in prison have substance abuse disorders. In New Hampshire right now, we have hundreds of people on a waiting list to get into the program, believe it or not,
Wow.
a program called Choose Love in prisons for inmates.
I had
Um,
heard that. It was a waiting
yeah,
list.
I remember the first time I went into a prison, and I was supposed to, so I donated some of my books. I have a book called Nurturing Healing Love. And I thought, I was going in to speak to male prisoners, and nothing against males, but I was thinking, I don't see male prisoners reading a book called Nurturing Healing Love. But I do see their families, I do see the prison staff, and I do know that it'll make a difference. And then they asked me to come in and talk with them about it. But I was blown away, Donna, when everyone had not only read the book, but they dog-eared it, underlined it, highlighted it, they rewrote passages and questions, and they were
Wow.
all in. And what I learned from them was that they never knew they had a choice.
Mm,
Choices are
mm,
superpower in life, but you
yeah.
don't know that you have it unless you are given that awareness and some skills and tools to be able to make the right choice. They never knew. They told me that all they ever knew was anger, hatred, and resentment. And they were
Mm,
literally just following a pattern. And now that they knew, even the inmates I've spoken to that are lifers, they're never going to get out. There's a unit in Connecticut, in Cheshire, and they chose the Choose Love program to teach to inmates, because they know that the inmates need these skills and tools to rehabilitate and be able to be successful and productive outside the prison walls when they return to society. And it's just, oh my God, it's been an incredible experience. It's some of my favorite work, actually, because I love speaking and watching this awareness come up into somebody's
Yeah.
face and in their eyes when they go, oh my gosh, like there's so much registering within them. I had a choice. I
Mm.
had a choice and I didn't even know it. And think about it. If you think about it in your own life, you know, we're going through life and everything we do, everything we say, every interaction that we have is a choice. How often do you remember that? You know,
Mm.
you know, we get cut off and we get enraged, or, you know, we get annoyed with our family and we say something cutting or biting, or, you know, and we
Yeah.
forget. And we need to, I need to be reminded. I really need to be so mindful that every interaction is a choice. And so for these adults that never knew, they could have learned as kids, but they didn't. And so now they're in prison and they're learning this, and it's like, bing, you see the light bulb go off, and it
Mm.
changes them forever. In fact, that first group that I went in to see, we actually videoed that, and it's in a documentary called Surviving Sandy Hook. But the guy from the BBC that was in there videotaping, he was like, I don't believe that these guys are saying that their lives are changed, but it was just reading a book. And, you know, I don't really believe it. So he went back a couple months later and he re-interviewed the guys that were the most outspoken, and he's like, look, nothing in your life changed. You're back in your cell. Are you still choosing love? And they said, yeah, of course. And he was
I
like,
get chills.
why? And they're like, because choosing love feels good, and
Yeah.
anger, hatred, and resentment feels bad. And, you know, what they're not saying is that every day we're doing things to relieve our pain and to
Yeah.
feel better. And so we're doing it in a way that is not healthy, a reactive way,
Yeah.
or we're doing it in a positive way, in a way that can bring about the highest and best version of ourselves, in a way that helps and heals and strengthens relationships instead of destroying them.
You know, and I think too, often it's generational trauma. If your parents, grandparents, and people, whoever in your family don't do the healing, it just keeps overflowing. And I think it builds up till it hits one person, and that person either is explosive and they
Mhm.
do things they wouldn't normally do when they're in a loving state, and they it sounds to me what you're explaining is they're breaking the cycle.
Break in the cycle. I don't know any other way, Donna,
Mm.
to
Mm.
break the generational cycle of trauma and pain other than to educate us
Yeah.
about how to do it,
Yeah.
how to be aware of it, and then how to choose love over fear, over that fear that's innate in you, that you have learned, that you were born with through the passing down of trauma. You can do it. That's the message, is that there is hope. There is
Mhm.
a solution. It is possible for every person. Look, I have been in situations, and I feel like it's the truest honor and blessing of my life, but I have been in generations and I have worked with people that have been in a tremendous amount of pain. People that even I feel a little hesitant and maybe even have a little a somewhat fearful approach of,
Yeah.
and they are hungry and craving
Yeah.
for someone to see that light of humanity, to see who they really are. I mean, that's something that we all need and want. But the people who are the most explosive, the most violent, they don't feel seen. You know, and I've actually spoken to school shooters, and I've worked with the most difficult of the population, and I understand that they are there because of pain and
Yeah.
because of their inability to grow through that pain, because you can't unless you understand some of the skills and tools that we teach. And, I have a tremendous amount of compassion, and this is something, this is how I thoughtfully responded to the tragedy. I thought about the shooter in the Sandy Hook Elementary School scenario, and I realized, right off the bat, anybody that could do something so heinous must have been in a tremendous amount of pain. And I forgave him. And I have a Christian background. And so that's what I was taught from being very small, is that you forgive so that you're forgiven. But what I didn't understand is the tremendous benefit to me of
Yeah.
that forgiveness process.
Mm-hmm.
That is how you cut the cords that attach you to pain.
Yeah.
It's through forgiveness. And so, I was able to do that, but I look at these other people and I understand now what I didn't then, that, there, and it's basically, it's culminated in my philosophy that I say that there are only two kinds of people in the world. There are good people, like the people that are listening to this, that are trying their best, that want to learn and grow. And then there are good people in pain. And that's a hopeful statement, because there's always something that we can do to help another person who's in pain.
Yeah. And I think too, whether it's drugs or alcohol, is the reason that they're in prison. And when they start to do your program, what I'm thinking is that they've hit their enough. They've just had enough of the emotional, physical, whatever the pain is, they've hit the enough, and now they're open to the solution of choose love.
Yes, absolutely. They've pretty much hit rock bottom if they're in prison, and they're introduced to another way that they didn't know was available. And
Mm-hmm.
they're curious, and they find hope in knowing that there is another way. So it's all volunteer, right? For the guys and the women that take this program, but it's those that want more, want to get better, want to increase their self-love
Yeah.
and acceptance, and they do it through this formula. And it's really, it's so incredible to see. I've been to so many graduations and spoken to so many people who've made heinous mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't, and they will tell you, didn't know love. And they certainly didn't know that they could choose it.
And here's the thing, when you know better, you do better.
When you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
That's a way to forgive ourselves. I've made so many mistakes. I can't judge anyone, but the hardest person to forgive is ourselves. And I'm still working on that. But that is one of the things that I say. If I had known better, I would have done better, of course.
Yeah.
And that's the same for everyone listening. And so forgiving yourself, sometimes we're the worst critics for ourselves, and we
Yeah.
have this brain that is trying to keep us safe. It's trying to keep us in that comfort zone. It does not want us to fail. So the messaging that we hear is, you're not enough. Don't try that. You're
Mm-hmm.
not as good as the other people, our comparison brains, right? That are now comparing to the ideal that we see on the cell phone that's not even real. Don't do it. You're not, you can't compete in that arena. There's so many other people. My brain tells that to me. And so, but what I know is that that's just my brain's way of trying to keep me safe. And
Yeah.
so I've worked up my self-esteem, my self-confidence and self-worth, how I feel about myself, that I'm able to talk back to that voice and say, thank you, brain.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to keep me safe, but you know what? I know that I am more than enough. I am worthy. I can do this. Not I
Mm-hmm.
was, not I will be, but I am. And by the way, there's no truer statement for every person on this planet. You were created for, a reason and a purpose, and only you can do that. You're a treasure, and we all just need to find that reason and purpose. And by the way, sometimes we find it through pain. I certainly found my purpose through pain. And it's just being kind to ourselves, is treating ourselves like we would a best friend. It's rewiring our brain from trying to keep us in our comfort zone to having the courage that we need to get outside of that comfort zone into our growth zone and to be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, thank you. As we wrap up, what's your words of wisdom to people who are listening or who've been through what you've been through?
I would love to leave everybody with the Choose Love formula so that you can have it as a skill and tool in your belt. It's simple, but simple isn't always easy. And we have to take it out and use it, and in different situations. But if you have a pen or pencil or your cell phone, write it down. The formula starts with courage. And we all have the capacity for the courage that Jessie showed, but courage is like a muscle. We need to practice it to strengthen it. And I'm talking about the courage that it takes to be kind, to do the right thing instead of what's just easy, to pause when somebody is coming at us, with unkind words, or a look or something else, and to understand that that person's in pain and to thoughtfully respond with love. It takes so much courage every day to get up and to be grateful, especially, and that's the second character value, by the way, gratitude. Having the courage, and you see that this goes in order, the courage to be grateful even when things aren't going our way. And everybody's heard of gratitude, but an active practice of gratitude, what does that look like? That looks like, before you open your eyes, saying 3 things you're grateful for. Before you go to bed, writing down 3 things that you're thankful for in a gratitude journal. I actually tick off gratitude all day long. And it's that, those thoughts of gratitude that actually fortify us from the inside out to better be able to manage the difficulty in our lives. Gratitude actually helps us move through pain and struggle with strength and grace. It's gratitude. So really, and there's always something to be grateful for. And by the way, it helps us. We use it as the great mind shifter. We have these tens of thousands of thoughts that go through our head every single day. We know through the latest neuroscience that the vast majority of them, between 70 to 80%, are negative, and over 95% are repetitive. So those same thoughts broiling over and over. And we know every single thought we think impacts us on a cellular level. So it causes, the negative thoughts cause inflammation, that toxic rumination that keeps us spiraling down, leading to depression and worse. And, the thing is, the great mind shifter is when you're in a position of negativity. By the way, any emotion you feel is okay. And there's brand new research called emo diversity that Inside Out 2, the movie, was based on, that the more emotions you feel every day and the more varied, the more mentally healthy you are. So emotions are simply information for us that help us navigate our world. They're neither good nor bad. Even the hard ones, the painful ones, are telling us something. So get curious with them. But once you're ready to shift away and you need a break, maybe think of something that you're grateful for. And that thought gives you a 10% boost in your mood immediately. It is such a powerful tool. There's no more powerful tool and no more instantaneous mood lift than practicing gratitude. And that actually strengthens you to be able to consider our third character value in the formula for choosing love, which is forgiveness. So forgiveness is so powerful. I talked a little bit about my journey before, but literally forgiveness gives us the ability to put down that generational pain that we carry, any sort of pain, anything that happened to you, you can forgive. I forgave the man who murdered my son, and you listeners, whatever's happened to you, you can forgive. You do not have to carry that pain. You do not have to do it. You don't want to give it to your your kids, and that pain literally that you're carrying with you is impacting every aspect of your life, every relationship. So choose forgiveness, learn how to forgive, use our program. And then it definitely takes courage to forgive, especially when the person who hurt you isn't sorry, doesn't care, doesn't know. And that's sometimes the situation you can still forgive because it comes from you and your heart, and it's for your well-being. And then the last character value is compassion in action. That is when we have the courage to step outside of our busyness, distraction, even our own pain and suffering to help someone else. And here's the kicker right here. When we help other people, we help and heal ourselves. And I know, Donna, that you know that. I
Mhm.
know that through my journey, everything that I do for others helps and heals me. I know it's the same with you. That is so powerful. Think about generations that understand that. That's why we're here, to help and heal other people as well as ourselves. And that is choosing love. So courage plus gratitude plus forgiveness plus compassion in action. It's the in action. So positive action is the opposite of anxiety. Doing something for someone else will help you. And any issue that you're facing, that's choosing love.
Thank you. One of the things too, for me, when I live in gratitude, I have a positive attitude. I-
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
you
And
do
it
notice the
feels so
difference.
much better.
Oh, yeah.
You're a nicer person. People like you more. It's good for all your relationships.
You like yourself more.
Absolutely. You like yourself more. It leads to greater success. There are so many research reports, like thousands and thousands on the benefits of practicing gratitude. It will benefit you, but you have to do it. It's not hard, but you got to put the effort in. Whoever told us, did anybody ever tell you that happiness is your responsibility and comes from within you? It doesn't come from someone else. It's not
Mm,
their fault that you're not happy. It's your responsibility, and it takes work. And you want to be happy, practice this formula.
yeah, yeah, it works.
Yeah, it works.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you well. I hope be part of your movement. I'm really excited
Absolutely.
about it, and I hope
We
the
welcome
listeners.
and embrace you. And I'm so excited to work with you
Thank
in
you,
your field, and so appreciate everything that you do. Thank you.
thank you, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to support the Sharing Without Shame podcast, please subscribe, like, and leave a review. If you're in need of emotional support, Donna offers private sessions. For more information about Donna and the services she offers, visit www.sharingwithoutshame.com or email her at donna4support@comcast.net. Nothing in the Sharing Without Shame podcast is intended to establish a therapist-patient relationship or intended to replace the services of a trained therapist, doctor, or health professional, or substitute for professional mental health, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Until next time, may your faith and strength heal your heart.